Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 8th July 2020. And the articles that we are going to discuss are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 6 talks about the increasing nuclear arsenal capacity of China. And in this regard, the authors have highlighted the various concerns for India due to this expansion in the nuclear arsenal of China. So let us look at the various concerns that India faces because of the growing Chinese nuclear arsenal. And this can be a very important aspect for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view under the topic International Relations. And this can also be a very important aspect for us from General Studies paper 3 point of view under the topic Security. So in this regard, let us look at the various challenges that India faces because of growing nuclear arsenal of China. Now in this regard, the authors have said that China is pursuing a planned modernization of the nuclear arsenal. And this is particularly because of the fears that the multi-layered missile defense capabilities of United States pose to the China. And accordingly, China has been pursuing a policy of planned modernization of its nuclear arsenal. Now, what are the evidences of increase in the nuclear arsenal of China? So, according to the International Panel on Fissile Materials, China is estimated to possess about 2.9 metric tons of weapons-grade plutonium. And compared to China, India's weapons-grade plutonium stocks are only about 0.6 tons. Further, according to a recent report by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China's nuclear arsenal has risen from 290 warheads in 2019 to 320 warheads in 2020. So these reports throw light on the growing nuclear arsenal of China. So what are the causes of concern for India because of this increasing nuclear arsenal of China? So the first concern is the expansionist mode of China. Now we note that United States of America and Russia have been attempting to reduce their nuclear arsenals. However, China is increasing their nuclear arsenal, which is a cause of concern because the United States of America and Russia already have the highest nuclear arsenals, and despite that, they are trying to reduce their nuclear stockpiles. However, at the same time, when the world is pursuing a policy of reducing the nuclear warheads, China is trying to increase its nuclear capability. Further, India faces dual challenge because of increasing nuclear power of China. And this is because India has to face two nuclear armed countries in terms of Pakistan and China on its borders. Further, when we look at India's nuclear capacity, it is of very limited nature as compared to China. And according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, India has roughly 150 nuclear warheads, which is even lower than the Pakistan's 160 warheads. Further, the Chinese nuclear capability is of sophisticated nature, and this gives China a coercive leverage which it can use in aggression against India on the line of actual control, and it can use such nuclear capability for its advantage in the standoffs on the line of actual control. Further, another cause of concern is that China has been building its nuclear bases close to Indian borders. And particularly, it has started building up bases in the Xinjiang region, which is very close to Aksai Chin. So in this case, India faces threat from these nuclear bases, which are very close to the Indian border. Further, China has various land-based missiles, and these are primarily road-mobile missiles. And an important cause of concern for India can be that it could play a key role in any larger conventional offensive that the People's Liberation Army of China might mount against Indian forces along the line of actual control. So in all, we see that China is in expansionist mode when it comes to the nuclear arsenal. Further, India will have to face dual challenge on its border in terms of facing Pakistan and China, which are both nuclear powers. Further, India has a limited nuclear capability when it comes to comparison with China. And also, the Chinese nuclear capable weapons are more sophisticated as compared to that of India. And also, China is pursuing a policy where it is building up the nuclear bases which are very close to Indian borders and which pose a threat to the national security of India. And another fear is that China might use these nuclear powers for conventional offensive on the line of actual control. So, in this regard, the author suggests that India should start seriously assessing its nuclear doctrine and at the same time redouble the efforts to get a robust nuclear triad capacity for creating a deterrence effect. And regarding India's nuclear doctrine, we already know that it is no first strike policy, which means that India is not going to use the nuclear weapons in the first place. However, when faced with a nuclear attack, India reserves a right for retaliation in terms of nuclear weapons. So, in this regard, the author suggests that India needs to reassess its nuclear doctrine and try and double its robust nuclear triad, which will help in creating a deterrence effect on the nuclear powers of China and Pakistan, which lie on the borders of India. Now, this article on page number 7 talks about the geopolitical issue that is happening in South China Sea because of the Chinese assertion. And this is a very important topic for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view under the topic International Relations. And if you go through the previous year question papers, you will find that a question has already been asked in the year 2016 in the General Studies paper 1. And this question was related to the geopolitical significance of South China Sea in the present context. So in this regard, in a previous DNS video, we have already covered the geopolitics of South China Sea. So what we will do is that we will revise from that DNS video the important geopolitical issues that are there in the South China Sea. Further, as we note that the first article today was related to the growing nuclear arsenal of China. So this is also another important issue related to China and what are India's interests in the South China Sea. And after the South China Sea issue, we will look at the need for maritime strategy for India, which is also a very important aspect related to the India-China relations. So in all, we will be covering 3 important articles related to China. First is the growing nuclear arsenal, second is the geopolitics of South China Sea, and third is the India's need for a maritime strategy to counter the Chinese assertion or increasing influence of China in the Indian Ocean region. Now we note that Indo-Pacific in general and South China Sea in particular has recently emerged as the geopolitical center of gravity. And the importance of South China Sea lies in the 1/3 of the world trade which transits through this sea. Further, it has rich oil and natural gas resources and it accounts for about 10% of the world's fishery. However, this South China Sea has recently become a region of contestation among the coastal states which surround it. So as you can see in this map, the location of South China Sea and the countries which are surrounding this South China Sea. So mainly it is surrounded by China, Vietnam, Philippines and various other countries. And accordingly, all these countries have been asserting their rights in the South China Sea's waters. However, it is the China which has asserted itself to be the most important power in the South China Sea. And it has claimed about 90% of the area of South China Sea with its conception of the 9-dash line. So in this map, you can see that China has asserted its rights on 90% of the South China Sea by conceptualizing this 9-dash line. So it covers mainly the 90% of the South China Sea region. Further, besides China, the United States of America has increased its military presence in the region under the concept of freedom of navigation operations. And it has done so in order to enforce the rule-based navigation of high seas, which is in accordance with the UN Convention on Law of Seas. And the principle of freedom of navigation under the UN clause provides for free movement of vessels in the high seas. So this has increased the military presence of United States of America in the South China Sea. Now, besides these military powers, Japan has also asserted its rights as a result of the disputed Senkaku and Diaoyu Islands. Further, the Philippines, Vietnam have emerged as regional players and they have asserted their rights in the Spratly and the Paracel Islands. So in this map, you can see all these important locations which have been contested amongst various countries. So for example, the Pratas Island, the Paracel Island, the Spratly Islands, the Scarborough Shoal, and the Senkaku and the Diaoyu Islands. So all these locations are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, besides these contested islands between different countries, there are other players which include Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. Now, what is the power game that is going on in the South China Sea? So, we see that Indo Pacific has emerged as the center of gravity of geopolitics, and the United States of America has increased its presence in region both in terms of economics and the military presence. Further, China in the past decade has challenged the hegemony of US in the region by asserting its dominance through the Nine Dash Line, claiming the South China Sea to be its territorial waters. And China has also increased its military presence, which has resulted in confrontations with the littoral states like the Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, etc. Now, in this background, various concerns have been raised regarding the future of Indo-Pacific region because of the transformation of relationship that is going on between US and China because of the assertion of China in the South China Sea. Further, the Chinese assertion is visible in its ballistic missile tests which were conducted recently in the South China Sea. Now, due to the impact of COVID-19, US might reduce its presence in the South China Sea, which will further embolden China's intentions. So, in this power game that is going on between South China Sea and the transformation in the power game which is being witnessed because of the COVID-19 pandemic in this sea, let us look at its relevance for India. Now, India and Southeast Asian countries, mainly which are part of the ASEAN, have always treated the South China Sea as a global common. And accordingly, the Chinese claim on the South China Sea as its territorial waters does not stand the scrutiny of the global commons. Further, it has acted as an important sea lane of communication historically, and India had its trading presence from Kedah in Malaysia to Guangzhou in China. Further, we note that India's trading relationship and partnership with the ASEAN countries has been increasing. So, in this background, the security of South China Sea is very important for India's interests. And we note that nearly $200 billion of our trade passes through the South China Sea. And also, many Indian citizens study, work, and invest in ASEAN countries as well as China, Japan, and Republic of Korea. So, in this background, it can be clearly said that we have stakes in the peace and security of this region in common with the others who reside this region. And as such, the freedom of navigation as well as other normal activities with the friendly countries are essential for our economic well-being. Now, some of the points that we have discussed here have been highlighted by a former diplomat of India. And he further says that regional arrangements will become even more important for our economic recovery and rejuvenation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And if India intends to think global and act local, India has to be part of the global supply chain in the world's leading growth region for the next half century. And for this, India needs to play a proactive role in regional arrangements like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And because the value of such agreements goes beyond the economic gains that they generate for India or the region. So this means that India needs to be a part of the various regional arrangements, and they can be very important for India in pursuing its interests in the region, and especially in the South China Sea, which is a very important region for India from its security, both economic as well as territorial. Now, after looking at the geopolitical game that is going on in the South China Sea and how India's interests will be affected because of the increased Chinese assertion, let us look at the important question that why India needs a maritime strategy to counter China in the naval theater. Now, these points that we are discussing here have also been highlighted by a former diplomat of India. And in this, it has been asserted that China has been using the excuse of carrying out scientific research in the exclusive economic zones of other countries to increase its naval presence. And it has also been gathering important oceanic data by this excuse. Now, as you can see in this diagram, this region represents the land of a country, and this is the baseline mark. So the region beyond this baseline mark and up to 12 nautical miles is known as territorial waters. And beyond this, for further 12 miles, it is known as the contiguous zone. And from baseline till 200 nautical miles, it is known as the exclusive economic zone. Now, as far as the rights of the countries in these areas are concerned, the nations have sovereign rights over the territorial waters. However, they have economic or exploration rights in the exclusive economic zone up to 200 nautical miles. So, accordingly, China has been using the excuse of carrying out scientific research in the exclusive economic zones of different countries. However, by doing so, it has been increasing its naval presence and gathering important oceanic data. And it has done the same thing in South China Sea, and we see that it has started claiming 90% of the waters of South China Sea by conceptualizing the 9 dash line. Further, China has also been increasing its maritime survey missions in the Indo-Pacific regions. And in this background, let us look at some recent instances where China has been asserting in the maritime region. So in recent past, Indian Navy has interdicted Chinese maritime research and survey vessels that had entered our exclusive economic zones and continental shelf area without our prior consent. Further, Australia has also raised concerns about the Chinese marine research ship of studying the submarine routes from Australia into the South China Sea. And also Chinese research vessels have been spotted in the southern region of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands of India. Further, the Chinese Navy, which is also known as the PLA Navy or the Plan, its intelligence gathering ships have sailed our coastline to gather information on the naval facilities and ships. So these are few issues that have been highlighted or recent instances which have been highlighted by a former diplomat of India regarding the increasing Chinese naval presence and also its assertion in the maritime domain. Now, in doing so, China has exploited various provisions of the UN Clause or UN Convention on Law of Seas. So, the UN Clause says that the military vessels have right to innocent passage to traverse the territorial sea of a coastal state without entering the internal waters, so long as they are not prejudicial to the peace, good order, and security of the coastal state. However, China has been exploiting this right of innocent passage to gather information regarding the oceanic data and also important strategic locations. And regarding this, concerns have been raised by various coastal countries. So now, what are the threats which are posed by the Chinese presence? So it has been argued that in the coming 12 to 24 months, the Chinese could step up their efforts to secure significantly improved data in the seas between the Malacca Straits and the Djibouti and in Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. And you might be knowing that the Malacca Strait is one of the important choke points in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific region. Further, the Chinese might try to send another survey vessel without our permission into the exclusive economic zone. And we have seen that recently India had interdicted a Chinese vessel which entered our exclusive economic zone without our prior consent. Further, China might deploy unmanned underwater drones in our exclusive zone or economic exclusive zone. And further, the Chinese Navy might send intelligence gathering ships in our coastal areas by exploiting the various provisions of the UN Clause, that is, the innocent passage by naval vessels which are permissible under the relevant provisions of the UN Clause, like the freedom of navigation operations, as we have learned. So now all these instances and the threats which are posed by the Chinese presence highlight that India also needs to focus on a maritime strategy. So presently we have the necessary capacity to monitor and interdict survey vessels well before they enter our exclusive economic zone. However, there is a need for developing a comprehensive underwater or maritime domain awareness strategy, and this will require coordination between our national security agencies, the Navy, and the government departments which are responsible for marine environment and disaster management. However, there is a need for collaboration with the like-minded countries which share our concern. So in these two discussions, we have seen the importance of the naval domain or the maritime domain for India. And in this, we have seen some of the threats which are posed by the Chinese presence in the South China Sea and how it impacts the interest of India. And also we have seen that China has been increasing its presence in the exclusive economic zones of various coastal countries, and it will be challenging India in the near future. So in this background, India also needs to focus on the maritime domain and develop a comprehensive maritime strategy. And all these points that we have discussed here were highlighted by a former diplomat of India. And that is why they become important for us from the exam point of view, and also provide us a different dimension on the India-China issue. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now let us look at the next three articles which are important for us from the prelims perspective. First article is on page number 1 and it is related to the golden bird wing butterfly, which has been named as India's largest butterfly. So the important points that we should note is that the golden birdwing is India's largest butterfly. Second important point is that it is found in the Himalayas. And previously this record of the largest butterfly of India was held by the southern birdwing. Besides this, we also need to note that all male and female butterflies in this species are not of equal sizes. So the size of the female Himalayan butterfly is about 194 millimeter, and as compared to this, the male golden birdwing is smaller and is about 106 only. And how is this length calculated? So it is the length of the wingspan, and you can see that in the diagram shown here. The next important article from prelims perspective is on page number 7, and it is related to the issues that are happening in Ethiopia. Now this news article is important because the present Prime Minister of Ethiopia was awarded the Nobel Prize for brokering historic 2018 peace agreement with the neighboring Eritrea. And this ended a 2-decade military standoff between the two countries. Now what is the concern that is going on in the Ethiopia right now? So in this case, the present Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Mr. Abiy, belongs to Oromos community, and he is keen to promote his version of an inclusive Ethiopian national identity which is distinct from the ethnicity-based model of federalism which has been provided in the Constitution of Ethiopia of 1995. Further, in this context, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has disbanded the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, which represented the 4 important ethnic communities of Ethiopia. And after banning this EPRDF, he has launched a new prosperity party. So in this context, it becomes very important for us to know the ethnic groups that are involved in power struggle in Ethiopia. So first is the Oromos community, which comprises 1/3 of its total population, and to which the present Prime Minister of Ethiopia belongs. Second is the Amharas community, which is the second largest ethnic community in Ethiopia. And third are the Tigrayans, who make up about 6% and wield the largest power in Ethiopia. Now presently in Ethiopia, the general elections have been indefinitely suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is due to this suspension of election process in Ethiopia, the concerns have been raised regarding the moves of the present Prime Minister of Ethiopia. So what is important for us from preliminary examination point of view are the ethnic communities that are involved in power struggle in Ethiopia. And sometimes you will find that questions have been asked in the preliminary examination related to important ethnic communities in news. And this next important article from prelims perspective is on page number 9. And this is related to an important law of United States of America, that is the CAATSA law. So what is this CAATSA law? So it stands for Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. And this law restricts defense purchases from Russia, Iran and North Korea. So whichever country is involved in defense purchases from these 3 countries, that is Russia, Iran and North Korea, or other adversaries of United States of America, will attract sanctions from United States of America. And in this regard, USA has urged all its allies and partners to forego transactions with Russia. And if they do so, they will face sanctions from USA. Further, US has said this in the context of India's plan to buy 21 MiG-29 fighter jets and also 12 Sukhoi Mk-1 from Russia. Further, previously India has been getting waiver from the United States President, and in this case, the US President has the authority to waive the CAATSA sanctions on a case-to-case basis. However, the United States of America has warned that India should not assume that it will get a waiver every time, and particularly for this deal related to the 21 MiG-29 and 12 Sukhoi Mk-1. Further, you might be knowing that when India was having a deal with Russia related to the S-400 missile defense system, this CAATSA law was also in news. And accordingly, knowing basics of the CAATSA law and what is it actually related to is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So these 3 news articles that we have discussed here are important from prelims point of view, and we have covered important pointers related to these news articles. articles. With this, let's take up the next news article. Now, this article on page number 6 is related to the recent extrajudicial killing in the state of Tamil Nadu. And this issue has been covered extensively in previous DNS videos on 2nd July 2020 and 4th July 2020. And in these videos, we have covered various aspects of police reforms that are required in India and also the UN Convention Against Torture. So you can go through these videos and revise the important aspects of the UN Convention Against Torture and the various aspects of police reforms in India. So with this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.